Hi, and welcome to Messy-nism, the Jewish Understanding of Moshiach, Episode 7. This week we navigate through the approach of Jewish mysticism to Moshiach, starting with the Heichalot literature and proceeding to the Zohar, Rabbi Avraham Abulafia, the Arizal, and his student R Chaim Vital, and finally culminating in the most famous and successful Jewish false messiah of the past 1600 years, Shabbetai Tsvi. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy. If you find these shiurim interesting or valuable, I'd be grateful if you would share them with a friend.
Okay. The amount of damage that these folks did to the Jewish people.
Oh yeah, tremendous.
Tremendous.
We still feel it today.
Yeah.
For sure.
Apparently there are still dudes who follow that dude.
Yeah, we're gonna get to all of that. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're gonna start. So we've covered historically references to Mashiach or the Messianic time, we'll call it, in Tanakh, even though we don't have like an actual Mashiach. Then we covered a sampling from the Gemara. We talked through the two different approaches, Rambam more rational, the Gaonim more miraculous, and then we went through a bunch, probably not all, but a good portion of the people who actually laid claim to being a Messiah from before the Common Era through 1600s. Through the Rishonim. Sounds good. Now what I'd like to do is take a little bit of a step back and talk about a second thread of messianic claimants who are more mystical. And just like I made the caveat before that I'm not a historian, I'm certainly not a mystic. So I'm more than happy to be corrected on anything that I plan to share tonight, but I think that it warrants its own share, because the mystical, which I will leave undefined because I've heard way too many different definitions of what Jewish mysticism is by people who are far more qualified than I am, but I will say you'll know it when you see it. I think that the messianic claimants who are more mystically inclined are radically different than those that we've covered so far. To my knowledge, the first mention of a Moshiach in mystical text comes to us from the Heichalot literature. So some of this, we're going to try to go in chronological order, but some of the material is hard to date. There are works that I'll say traditionally we assume are older than the Heichalot literature, such as what we have over there on the last column, the Sefer Yetzirah, which is ascribed variously to Adam Harishon, Avraham Avinu, and the Sefer HaBahir, which is attributed to Rabbi Yechonia ben Akana. Correct. The Heichalot literature, for our purposes, we will date to somewhere between the 1st and the 3rd century, unless you assume it's pseudographic, but we're not going to work with that assumption.
Does the Sefer Raziel HaMalach fall into that category?
So the Shari Koma, Raziel HaMalach, and all of those things are outside, we'll say, of our purview for today. It's unclear when they were written or by whom. Okay, so maybe what we'll read. So there are at least two versions of the Heichalot literature. One I have here is a translation by Morton Smith, and corrected by Gershom Sholem, who we're going to talk about in a minute. This is the Heichalot Rabbatai. There's also Heichalot Zutrai, which is the Heichalot is the we'll call them palaces. Let me back up and give a little bit of background. Has anybody heard of the Heichalot literature?
Not as the Heichalot. I've heard of Sefer Yetzirah and I've heard of the Bahir.
Okay, so Heichalot is completely different. Heichalot is a series of recorded spiritual events. So the idea here is that it really starts with the Merkava that we get in Sefer Yechezkel. Let me actually turn on the air conditioner.
What's up, Joe? How's it going? I was looking for you. I was like, good sample on Tisha B'Av. My mother-in-law took a fall.
I was there Tisha B'Av night.
Well, we should have coordinated better.
When was it, during the day?
Yeah, like 2 o'clock.
Yeah, no, I wasn't there by then. I was sleeping at that point. Or no, actually, maybe I wasn't.
Wasn't bad.
I didn't sleep great that day, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first chapter of Sefer Yechezkel describes what is known as Maisa Merkava. Heichalot sees this vision of God leaving Eretz Yisrael in a divine transport, which he describes as a Merkava, a chariot, some sort of thing with wheels. The Heichalot literature is mystical.
Did the rabbi say that it was actually a Tesla?
Not
I
a
wouldn't.
Tesla.
I'm just saying.
Well, there is electricity, so I can see how.
You know.
Green thing circling.
There you go. So in the Heichalot literature, we get people trying to do the same kind of thing. These are records of Tanaim who have a mystical experience by creating their own Merkava, their own spiritual transport. What's that?
Vehicle.
Spiritual vehicle to take them into either an altered state of consciousness or an alternate reality, to take them away from their normal conscious waking life experience. This is described as the Yordei Merkava, the people who go down into their own Merkava, their own chariot, and then there's a record in the Heichalot literature of what they see there. They go to these Heichalot, these palaces, and in order to go from palace to palace, you have to use certain permutations of the names of God or the names of different malachim, and they record who they saw there, what they saw there. You get little snippets of this in the Gemara, where you have famously in Chagiga that Rabbi Akiva Arba Nichnesu LaPardes. So 4 people go into this Pardes, which is definitely not like a physical orchard. They go somewhere and have some sort of experience, and Rabbi Akiva is, warning them about what they're allowed to say, not allowed to say, things like that. You also get a few times in the Gemara where someone will darshan Maaseh Merkava, they'll expound on this section from Yechezkel, and when they do that, flame comes down from heaven, and all fireworks, things start happening that are out of the norm. So the Heichalot literature is a documentation of people who use these mystical techniques to go on a journey. And one of the people that they see on their journey is Moshiach.
What's the purpose of the journey?
It's a spiritual experience. They're trying to get closer to God, and they go from palace to palace, trying to come to like the inner sanctum, trying to get closer and closer to a direct experience of Hashem. Here, not for the average Joe. No, it's supposed to be a dangerous experience. I will just read to you very briefly from paragraph 143. Then shall Mashiach come forth from his prison with nothing except his staff and his sack, and he warns everyone that I am patient with you. Then do they say to one another, with what shall he conquer us? His countenance is not that of men, and his form is not that of men. His wealth is not that of men, and his strength is not that of... Okay, it goes on and on about their conversation with Mashiach. Then does Mashiach stand and wrap himself in prayer and gird himself as a hero for he who spoke and the world was, and he says, Ribono shel olam, remember on behalf of my suffering and grief and the darkness and obscurity in which I was cast, my eyes which beheld no light and my ears which heard great reviling, and the scurvy of my skin upon my bones. In other words, he's suffering. This takes us back to the suffering servant in Yeshayahu, and he continues on over here. He quotes some psukim from Zechariah. There's all these malachim who stand up on their feet and they address him. And he says many nations are going to join themselves onto a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And then does Mashiach say to them, go and assemble all of your brothers from all the nations, and they go and assemble all of Yisrael, and they bring them and cause them to stand before Mashiach, like the pasuk says in Yeshaya, and he quotes another pasuk from there, that there's going to be an ingathering of all of the different nations. And then Rabbi Shmuel pronounces a different name of a malach, and he gets transported somewhere else where Mashiach is no longer part of the story. Okay, so that, again, to my knowledge...
Very Kirkvoniga-ish.
Yeah, it's very, very out there stuff. So that, to my knowledge, is the oldest mystical information that we have that relates to Mashiach directly. I don't believe there's a reference to Mashiach in some of that older material. So now we're going to fast forward a couple hundred years to the end of the 13th century, where, to put it as politically correct as possible, the Zohar is brought out into public consciousness. So the Zohar was, we'll say, published or revealed by Rabbi Moshe de Leon, and he in the Zohar. So he's compiling all of this Zoharic material. In the Zohar, you get a lot of what we've seen already as sort of standard Mashiach material. So we have two Mashiachs, so Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef in the Zohar. We get specific dates, probably around the 14th century, when there's an expectation that Mashiach will come. We get references to Mashiach as related to a star coming forth. We have, what is it over here? B'shishim b'sheshi is Gala Melech HaMashiach, so it's talking about during a different yearly cycle. So in the 66th year of that cycle, so Mashiach will be revealed be'eretz HaGalil, in the Galil and Eretz Yisrael, v'kochav echad b'tzad mizrach, yivaleh shiva kochavim mitzad tzafon, and you have one star in the Mizrach that's swallowing up seven stars. So these are all symbolic occurrences.
Quick question.
Yeah, please.
Do you think the Zohar is accepted universally by the Jewish world as like part of the Jewish canon, so to speak, even though it's not part of Tanakh or Gemara or whatever? Would you say that it's universally accepted by the Orthodox world?
I wouldn't say universally, but I would say predominantly. How about that?
You don't hear about any type of anti-Zohar,
Not really. I'm just wondering, like, this is me being a Baal Tshuva and, like, just asking the question. I've never heard of anybody, like, talk smack about the Zohar, like, well, we don't hold like that, but I'm just saying, like...
There's certainly a school of thought.
Yeah?
Yeah. We can have that conversation
separately. Like a mainstream Jewish school of thought that's like, hey, this is not part of Judaism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I would definitely not say it is anywhere near a majority or even like a large minority. I would say it's a very small minority of people.
But also it's not dealing with, like, let's say, halacha, or with, like, so when you start dealing with mysticism, right, and then it's people like, okay, whatever, like, I think they're less passionate about...
Yes, that's true. It's interesting to note that there are some halachos in the Shulchan Aruch that are based on the Zohar.
And the Ben Ish Chai paskins frequently,
right,
according to...
So mainstream halacha will tell you, by and large, to paskin not like the Zohar. Meaning, if there's a contradiction between the Zohar and the Gemara, or even common practice, you go after common practice and not after the Zohar, unless you are a mystic, I guess.
Right.
One of the new ideas that we get in the Zohar that we haven't seen before, we had this idea in the Gemara that Mashiach ben Yosef is destined to die. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about the Sefer's Rubavel, where we have this anti-Mashiach, his name is Armilus, and he's going to come and kill Mashiach ben Yosef. For the first time in the Zohar, you get the idea that maybe he doesn't have to die. There's actually a discussion there of what needs to be done in order to prevent Mashiach ben Yosef from dying. And later, after the Zohar, in the end of the the 16th century, we'll say, with the Arizal, you actually get specific practices to ensure that Mashiach ben Yosef won't die. You get a tefillah in Shmona Esrei, a part of Shmona Esrei, where you can direct your tefillah to help make sure that Mashiach ben Yosef doesn't die.
Sounds good.
The only other thing I will... So, again, not being a Kabbalist or a mystic, I can't tell you that there is like an overarching approach to Mashiach in the Zohar. The only thing I will say is that by and large, when you get references to Mashiach in the Zohar, Mashiach is a mystic. He's either patterned after Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai directly, or Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is Mashiach, or Mashiach is part of the group that are mystically inclined. I should just mention the what we call the book of the Zohar is not actually one book. It's a compilation of multiple books. There is the Shabbetai Mishpatim. There's like in the Zohar, there's separate books that are all kind of pulled together into one. We'll call it anthology.
It's all in Aramaic.
It is all. There's some like Hebrew. It's kind of a weird Aramaic. It's not. It's not like the Aramaic of the Gemara. It's a little different, but yes, it's basically all in Aramaic.
Okay.
Okay, so that takes us up to the 13th century, where we meet a singularly unique individual. His name is Rabbi Avraham Abulafia. Is anyone familiar with Rabbi Abulafia?
Heard of him.
Okay, we could do like a whole separate class on Rabbi Abulafia because he's pretty amazing. In the mystical over, there's really two, we'll call it schools of thought or approaches to mysticism. There's the Zohar is very cerebral. It's very much like darshaning psukim, but it does it in a mystical way. So this pasuk is an allusion to this mystical concept. That pasuk, that word or gematria is an allusion to another.
There's like a grounding.
Right. It's okay.
It's
here's
the
the
Gemara's style with mystical stuff.
Right. Or it's stories of mystical encounters, but it's very similar to how the Gemara approaches.
A to B to C to D.
Right. Rav Abulafia is completely from the other school of mysticism, which is more ecstatic, more experiential. He's trying to have a mystical experience. Very specifically, he's trying to have a prophetic experience. And he has meditative techniques, and maybe if we do Sefer Yechezkel, or at least the first chapter or two, we can try to go through one of his techniques. But there's head movements, and there's like head movements and breathing techniques and like phrases to repeat in order to put yourself in like the state of mind to have a mystical experience. What's that? Not well, maybe.
Incidentally, Merkava is the gematria of ketamine.
There you go. Okay, so all of that is to say that Rav Abulafia.
What's his base? What's his ground? Like, what's his?
So it's a like, where does he get this from?
Yeah, I mean, or where's the source? Like,
well, some of it is really from the Heichalot, right? That this idea that you can have a mystical experience and you can go on a journey. You don't. What's really interesting to me is the Heichalot literature is probably the oldest stuff, or some of the oldest stuff. There is next to no commentary on the Heichalot. The Zohar, there's hundreds of books written as commentary on the Zohar because it's easy to like grapple with it the way you grapple with the Gemara. It's very hard to write a commentary on basically a diary of a mystical experience. So Rabbi Abulafia,
that's his personal experience.
Right. Well, Rabbi Abulafia he writes. I mean, he has like 24 books that are basically manuals on, not all of them, but most of them are manuals on like how to have this experience or how to like clear your mind and then use letter permutations to experience something. He also, Rav Abulafia writes a mystical commentary on the Moreh Nevuchim, which is like the Rambam's super rational like philosophy. So it's interesting how the Kabbalists try to make Rambam more of a Kabbalist as well. But the reason we're talking about Rav Abulafia is because he believed that he was Mashiach. He also felt that the job of Mashiach is to go convert the Pope. So this is, we'll say, the early 1300s.
Convert the Pope.
To go convert the Pope to Judaism, and then Mashiach will come. Then it'll usher in the Messianic age.
That's an interesting leap.
Yeah. So he goes to Nicholas III, and he arrives at the Vatican like a day or two before Rosh Hashanah, because the idea is convert the Pope on Yom Hadin, right? That makes
right.
And the Pope hears about this wacky guy who's come to convert him and immediately imprisons him and says, just hang out here in jail for the night because tomorrow I'm going to have you killed. And so Rabbi Abulafia is in jail.
That's true.
Yeah, right? Rabbi Abulafia is in jail on Erev Rosh Hashanah. That night the Pope dies. So that is spooky enough that the cardinals are like, no thanks, I don't know what's going on over here, but this guy needs to go. So they basically release him and send him on his way, and for all intents and purposes, that's like the last we hear of Rabbi Abulafia. He might have set up his own yeshiva after that, it's not clear.
How did he make the connection between the Pope converting and Mashiach?
He felt that was going to usher in the period of Moshiach.
Look,
if you convert all the Catholics, right, then then
the majority of the world at that point is Jewish.
Right.
In the 1300s, most of the world was Catholic.
And we have a billion people who have to keep Shabbos one time.
Yeah.
And that makes that
even harder. Yeah. We can't even get the Jews to do it, right? Okay.
Yeah, but if the Goyim are doing it, then maybe the Jews would jump on the bandwagon. Who Who
Yeah.
knows?
That's true. You're right. You don't know what action has the reaction. Right?
Yeah.
This is true.
The other can be like, oh, us too. Who knows?
Okay, so up next we have Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Arizal, and his student, or we'll say his most famous student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, Rabbi Chaim Calibres, I believe was his last name, and that is the end of the 1500s, beginning of the 1600s in Sfat. So there is like a renaissance of mysticism that takes place in Sfat, where there's this cadre of people who all gather around the Arizal. Really, before him, we have. Why am I blanking on his?
Chagon,
No.
No.
Part of the Ramak, Moshe Cordovero. So Moshe Cordovero is before him, but really the Arizal is the most famous, probably the most famous Kabbalist of all time.
He only lived to like his late 30s, right?
Yes. We have, so this set of books right here is supposed to be the writings of the Arizal. Of that set, next to none of it is actually written by the Arizal. We have almost nothing from his hand.
I wasn't there last week.
just for this, we have like some Zmiros on Shabbos that are actually from the Arizal's hand, but very little from his own hand. His most prominent student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, recorded all of his teachings. There's a separate school from a different student called Rav Yisrael Saruk, but we're going to focus on the Arizal and Rabbi Chaim Vital. So the Arizal innovates a lot in Kabbalah that didn't exist in Kabbalistic literature before him. So Sfirot, Partsufim, Gilgul, this idea of Tzimtzum, Kavanot. There's like a whole, if you want to pray like a Kabbalist, there's a whole series of Kavanot that you're supposed to have at each part of the davening, and you can look in various like Sidurim that have a whole process that you go through to accomplish things in the spiritual world. Part of what the Arizal did, part of the Arizal's thinking was that he was Mashiach ben Yosef, and therefore he added a tefillah or he added the opportunity in Shemona Esrei to daven that Mashiach ben Yosef shouldn't die. There are lots of different stories in the writings of the Arizal about the opportunity to bring Mashiach presenting itself, and then either his students failed to do what they were supposed to do, or the time wasn't yet right, and those stories usually end with him explaining that they missed their opportunity. I'm wondering if we should read this now or when we get to Shabbetai Tsvi. I'll read one thing from the Shahar Gilgul.
The Ramami Fano. Oh no, that's Gilguli Neshama. Never mind.
So this is Hakdama 27 in the book Shar HaGilgulim. He says as follows: V'kfar hodiacha ki ein taharas haneshamos u'biyasam ba'olam hazeh k'fi seder ma'alosam u'madregosam rak k'fi hamizdamein. The purity of the neshama and its coming into this world is not according to its elevated level. It's what's being presented, what is prepared to come into this world. According to the zechus of the person who's receiving this neshama. Sometimes you have a very elevated and exalted neshama, but it ends up descending into the depths of what's called the klipa. So in the Kabbalistic system, there are negative forces in the world. They're called klipot, the husk, and those negative forces sometimes they hold on to sparks of kedusha. They hold on to either certain neshamot or certain like divine attributes and sparks. And part of the job of the tzaddik, of the mystic, is to take those sparks of holiness out of the klipa and return them to where they belong. the reason I'm reading this to you is because it's all of this information is going to become much more relevant when we get to Shabbetai Tzvi in hopefully a few minutes. ולפעמים יראה כי הנשמה הזאת שהמשיכו עליו היא נשמה גדולה אלא שהייתה טובה בעמקי הקליפos. Again, sometimes a person who is, as he mentioned, I'm skipping a little bit over here, but you have a person who's a sinner who ends up with this great neshama because that person is in the depths of the klipos. He's such a negative person. That's why he gets this great neshama. It's going to be the job to elevate of this lowly person to elevate this great neshama. And then he continues that Gam Latam HaNizkar, also in this situation where you have a lowly person with a great neshama, Muchrachu Shaha'ish Hazeh, it's necessary that this person, Ya'atzuv Ma'od Kol Yamav, is going to be constantly depressed. And then one more interesting idea, L'pa'amim Yira Ki Ha'ish Hazeh HaChadash, Tia Nishmato Mu'ulo Gvo Ma'od Ve'enu Yachola Lahachnia Yetzro. And then when this lowly person has this great neshama, it's going to be very challenging, very difficult for him to be machnia his yetzer, to hold back his taivas and his inclinations because of the nature of this great neshama that he has.
That's the Ari.
That is R Chaim Vital channeling the Ari, or recording the Ari. Okay, so at or around the same time, you also have a really interesting phenomenon. Rav Yosef Cairo is the author of the Shulchan Aruch. Yosef Cairo also had what's called a Magid, and that is we'll say, a celestial teacher, either an angel or a neshama or something otherworldly that communicates with him and teaches him Torah.
Who is it?
Yosef Cairo. So, the Yosef Cairo was studying Shavuos night. So the tradition of staying up all night Shavuos night is a relatively recent one.
So he's the co-author of the Shulchan Aruch?
He is the author of the Shulchan Aruch.
But he had the Magid.
So
That was his Rebbe.
Right, the Magid is not like so the Magid's not teaching him halacha. There's a whole separate book, Magid Meisharim. It's around here somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Rav Yosef Karo based his Shulchan Aruch on the Torah. Yeah, so it wasn't like coming out of nowhere, like Joe the Angel is just like, hey, here's what you should write down.
Okay, I'll have to find it.
It'll be a bestseller, trust me.
Right, no, Rabbi Yosef Cairo is like mainstream halacha. He was like the Gadol Hador. Between the he wrote the Beis Yosef, and then he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. But he also has this like almost as a spiritual diary of his conversations with the Magid is supposed to actually be like the spiritual representation of the Mishnah. That's why Mishnah and Neshama have the same letters. So Yosef Cairo is studying Shavuos night with the author of L'Chadodi. Thank you, Shlomo Alkabetz. And he has this weird experience. He basically falls down, is not moving, and a voice comes out of his throat that is not his own, and that's his first experience of this Magid. That occurrence is part of what started off this idea of learning all-night Shavuos night. Before that, it really was not a thing, certainly not widespread, the way it is today. The reason for us learning about that is because we're going to see that experience repeated with Shabbetai Tsvi and actually with Shabbetai Tzvi's prophet. So let's get to Shabbetai Tzvi while we still have hopefully some time. Okay, if you were like me and you went to, we'll say, like a mainstream Orthodox yeshiva upbringing, you maybe had like an inkling that there was this guy who's kind of a weirdo and he claimed to be Moshiach, but like no one really wants to talk about it. And that's basically all I knew about Shabbetai Tzvi for a long time. The contrast between that and the academic world is like from one end of the universe to the other. If you are in academic studies with a focus on Jewish mysticism, you've definitely written about Shabbetai Tzvi. The book over there that's called Shabbetai Tzvi, The Mystical Messiah, which was written by Gershom Shalom, is like, I don't know, 1,000 pages or 1,500 pages, and it's like a drop in the bucket of what is out there in terms of books and videos and like it's infinite and continues to be so more and more so every day.
We grew up thinking that he was a real deal.
You grew up thinking he was the real deal. That's even worse. The one you're looking at right now, so Sholem basically documents everything that happened like day by day. You'll get like blow by blow. Okay, Tuesday morning, people woke up and this is what they thought and this is what they read in the newspaper, and it's very comprehensive. He has some theories about what led to the rise of Shabbetai Tsvi. A lot of that has been contested or sometimes even refuted. But let's take it step by step. I'm wondering if the best way to do is to give you like a synopsis, and then we can go back and fill in the details. I think that might be.
Let's talk about the overview.
Okay, the overview of the overview. So the basic story is in the, let's say, early 1600s, a man named Shabbetai Tsvi is born. It's very hard to tell what is fact and what is legend because so much legend has grown up around him. But we'll say the legend is that he was born on Shabbos Tisha B'Av, which is again like, ooh, spooky because Moshiach is supposed to be born on Tisha B'Av or whatever.
Right.
So he leads a pretty normal life for the first 25, 30 years where he studies in yeshiva, he studies Kabbalah, not necessarily a lot of the Arizal Kabbalah, more of the Zohar Kabbalah, but he's we'll call him like a lightweight Talmud Chacham, right? He's not the Gadol Hador by any means. Yeah, regular mainstream guy, but he's holding and learning. He hangs out a little bit with. So sorry, this is in.
Turkey area?
Yeah, Izmir, right in Turkey. Ottoman Empire, absolutely correct. He hangs out a little bit with the dervishes. Yeah, a little bit. I wouldn't say he had a lot of they influenced him very much, but he's definitely broader than just hanging out with the Jews. He starts to have
Jewish dervishes.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, there's a couple of.
That's cool. I didn't
There's
know.
actually a famous picture of the Jewish dervishes.
Oh, okay.
Hold on, I can find it.
So as he gets older, two things start to happen. One is he starts to essentially become either bipolar or have these like massive depressive experiences, and when those things happen, he starts to do some very weird things. So he believes that he is Moshiach. He either has a vision or whatever it is that he is the Messiah. We'll get to him being anointed in a minute, but so he believes he's Moshiach. He goes to meet this even younger than him, a Kabbalist who is known for being able to repair people's souls. This is a man by the name of Nathan of Gaza, or Natan of Gaza. And he goes there because he doesn't understand what's going on with himself. Like, why do I have these visions? Why do I believe I'm Mashiach? That's crazy, right? He goes to Nathan, and Nathan's like, that's not crazy. You're totally Mashiach, right? So that happens, let's say, 1648, 1649, sometime around there. And from there...
Why did he do that?
So Nathan believed he was Mashiach. And not only did he believe he's Mashiach, Nathan ends up being like his hype man. He's like Paul to Yashka. He convinces everyone else that this guy's Mashiach. So from there, things kind of take off. He does all kinds of, the technical term is antinomian, things that are against the law. He totally subverts like basic Jewish law. He uses a lot of Kabbalistic ideas to do that, as does Nathan of Gaza. It culminates with him, again, going to the Sultan to either have the Sultan like kneel before him and kind of, hand over the keys to the kingdom to him, or according to some opinions, to have the Sultan give him Yerushalayim. But he's expecting to basically just show up at the castle, not have to fire a shot, and things will just kind of work the way he wants them to work. He is, before we get to the end of the story, he is the most successful Jewish messianic claimant since Jesus, right? Like, by most accounts, the majority of the Jewish...
What's happening in Jewish...
So the majority of the Jewish world at this point believes that he is Mashiach. By majority, I don't just mean the lay people. I mean
Not just the Turkish people.
not the Turkish people, the Talmidei Chachamim. In our parlance, the Gedolim are like, yeah, that's Mashiach. We hold of him as Mashiach, like the Taz, like brand names are holding that this guy is Mashiach, to the point where people who are not even disagreeing, but are kind of like skeptical, are getting run out of town and lynched. The people are selling their homes. People are giving up on collecting debts. They'll sell their debt for pennies on the dollar because Mashiach is here and I got to go. It's actually in one sense, it's a beautiful thing to see how seriously people took it. But on the other hand, what happens is the Sultan imprisons him. For a little while, he basically turns his prison into like a visitor palace. They call it was like Migdal Oz or something, where he basically they bribed all the guards, and so anyone could keep coming to see him. And at a certain point, the Sultan, someone who comes to see him
is like Islam or die.
Yeah, well, there's a Jew who comes to see him who basically says like, "Oh, I know you're Mashiach, and I'm Mashiach ben Yosef," and he's like, "No, you're not." And that's it. That Jew goes to the Sultan and says, "I'm converting to Islam." And by the way, that Shabbetai Tsvi guy claims to be the king of the Jews, and he's trying to subvert you. The Sultan calls him in and says, "Okay, convert or die." Right? Unfortunately, the result of that ultimatum was Shabbetai Tsvi converted to Islam. Now, when that happened, the movement did not end. It broke into three different groups. There are the people who said, "Oops, not Mashiach." There are the people who said, "Well, if Mashiach converts to Islam, I guess I got to convert to Islam because that's probably the right thing to do." And then there are the people who said, "No, this is like
part of the play."
Yeah, this is part of the plan.
Oh.
This is the Mashiach has to go into the depths of the klipa, right? We talked about this a little bit. He has to go into the most impure, most anti-Jewish place to find those hard-to-reach sparks and elevate them. So we're going to just kind of continue to believe in him internally, we'll believe in him, but externally we'll still be Jews. What's that?
There's nothing to do right now. It's like a holding pattern, right?
Well, so what they do is they form this whole covert network where they'll act externally like they're regular Jews, but internally, and this is really a play on where they come from. Almost like conversos, right? They have this double life where externally I'm still going to shul, but when I send letters to my friend, I'm like, "Hey, by the way, Shabbetai Tsvi is really Mashiach. Still, like everything is cool. We know that, right?" Like, so you have those factions, and that group that kind of held on to Shabbetai Tsvi internally persists up to this very day, and we'll talk about them also.
Now, like in Suffern?
Yeah, like not in Suffern, but like now in Turkey, yeah. In Salonika, and like you can go on Amazon and buy their cookbook. Like these people are still around. So
the Shabbetai Tsvi people have a cookbook.
Yeah. The Don Met. So they call themselves the Maminim because they're the ones who really believe. But the term that they were given was the Don Met. Don Met is like the fakers or the turncoats. So
Don Met.
Don Met.
Moshiach French toast is incredible. Moshiach French toast.
Moshiach French toast.
Oh.
Okay, so let's talk. If you guys will indulge me for a few more minutes, let's talk about.
Lived until you had Mashiach pot pie.
Well, so their whole cookbook is interesting because part of the philosophy of Shabbetai Tsvi is sinning intentionally. Because if you one of the things we'll get to, one of the Gemara we talked about was that the place where Baalei Tshuva stand, even Tzaddik and Gemurim can't stand, right? So
is it like a pork,
Yeah. So the more averas I can do, then I can do teshuva for those averas. Then I'm even higher than a tzaddik gamor, right? So I'm sinning intentionally so that I can do tshuva on that sin, so that I can be elevated even greater.
Did it happen
So
before the conversion or after?
This is all before. This is all before. Okay. Well, let's unpack all this because this is to me just fascinating. So what's the historical context, and then we'll talk about like what caused this to erupt, right? So we mentioned before that usually Mashiach, the claimants arrive because there is some sort of trauma or tragedy. So you have, besides the expulsion from Spain, you have in 1648 and 1649. Terrible tragedies that are known as Gzeres Tachvatat, the Cossack massacres. Bogdan Chimliki led a peasant revolt who killed hundreds of thousands, if not more, people just broadly, but specifically really went after and massacred a tremendous amount of Jews. We have a keynote on Tisha B'Av about this, and killed them in the most heinous and disgusting ways possible. Now, all of these things that happen are true and support the cause, but they don't affect everybody. Meaning, the Jews in Yemen believed that Shabbetai Tsvi is Mashiach. The Jews in Yemen didn't suffer from the Cossacks, right? So there's more to it than just certain specific events, but all of these things to come together to give rise to this kind of situation. You have the massive expanse of Kabbalah. So before the Zohar, certainly, and before the Arizal, you don't have Abulafia. You have one or two people who claim to be Mashiach or have mystical experiences. After the Zohar comes out, and especially after the Arizal, there's more ideas. There's more philosophy to base your Mashiach on than there was ever before. Plus, you have the printing press, right? So now ideas can spread. People are much more literate. They're still very, very illiterate, but they're much more literate. There are newspapers, and we actually have records of the newspapers of the time that are talking about the Poles are like, oh, by the way, the Jews seem to think Mashiach is here. Like it's in the New York Times. Like it's in the papers of the times that this is happening, and that's what people are reading.
Like on South Park.
and that's what helps. It helps the works of the Arizal circulate. So there's a big machlokus between Gershom Sholem, who's like the doyen of mystical Jewish studies in the academic world, and the second generation Moshe Idel on whether or not the works of the Arizal are what precipitated Mashiach. So Sholem believes very much that everyone was reading the Arizal, or at least the rabbis were, and that's why they believed all the stuff that came out about Mashiach, because it was all based on the Arizal's Torah. Moshe Idel is like, there's no indication of that. It's impossible to answer these kinds of disagreements, because unless someone either writes that they are studying the Arizal or they write on like a commentary on the Arizal, you don't know what people are reading. The other thing that happened because of the expulsion from Spain, you have all of these. I'm not going to. The derogatory term is Marranos.
Yeah.
We'll call them crypto Jews, right? Marranos means pigs. So there are crypto Jews. There are Jews
who
who
allowed themselves to be baptized and then continue.
Conversos, right? There are Jews who externally
they would go to church.
Usually Nissan wouldn't realize that Marano's a pig.
Huh?
And Jews in Nissan wouldn't realize that Marano's a pig. Nissan Marano.
Ah.
What? Oh yeah.
Maybe they know. Maybe.
Yeah.
So you have all of these Jews who have to pretend externally that they believe one thing, but internally they know the truth, and that whole feeling is going to be justified when Mashiach shows up, when Shabbetai Tsvi, the Mashiach, shows up and says, all of the bad things that you were doing in pretending to be Christian, there's actually validity to that, and you were actually doing the most holy thing possible. So that makes me, as a converso, feel great. Like, oh, all the terrible things that I felt so bad that I couldn't express my Judaism and I had to do all these other things, I actually was doing exactly what this Mashiach would tell me that I should be doing. There's also like more unity among Jewish communities. So you have the Vad Arba Aratzos, the Council of the Four Lands, Germany, Bohemia. They all you have the Jewish nation is working together more than ever before. So if one community decides that Shabbetai Tsvi is Mashiach, it's not a lone satellite. There's a network, which is more in touch than ever before. Okay. I should also point out that this idea that Shabbetai Tzvi's part of what gave rise to his philosophy was the Arizal. That idea actually predates Sholem. There is a great book by Abba Hillel Silver on the history of the idea of Mashiach in general, where he's I think the first one that proposed that back in like 1910. Just so that we have that for the record. Okay. Okay, let's do his biography. So we mentioned born on Tisha B'Av. We mentioned probably bipolar. Because he goes through these periods of massive depression and then what his followers call the illumination, where he would suddenly come out of it and be euphoric. Correct. He had 3 marriages, 2 to human beings. So the first marriage, not consummated. The second marriage to a very peculiar woman named Sarah that we'll talk about. And the third marriage, any guesses?
Donkey? To
the Torah. He came to town and invited all the rabbis to his chuppah, where he took out and married a Sefer Torah. he was weird at a time when they didn't diagnose mental illness, right? So in like our parlance, he's a nebuch. He's going around doing these weird things, and it comes to a breaking point in whatever community he happens to be in, and they basically throw him out, right? They put him in cherem, or they throw him out, and he travels down the road to the next community, and as long as he's in his period of illumination, they think he's kind of a normal guy, and they need him for a minyan, so he now finds another home and continues his whole... There's no sense of like the first town doesn't call down the road to the second town and say, hey, by the way, watch out for this weird guy. They just, okay, he moves on his way. That's part of why there was no sense that like if he did something wrong here, it didn't like follow him to the next town. He even from a young age, he was very hell-bent on pronouncing the explicit name of God, which he eventually does in public. There's a story of him circling Yerushalayim 7 times, maybe on a donkey. There is like all these what they called mysticism, these weird things that he would do. Shalom documents where he's pushing a stroller down the street, and in the stroller is a fish. Now the fish has symbolic meaning, al pi Kabbalah, but these are weird things that he would do. He celebrated the Shalosh Regalim, all 3 together in 1 week. Now that's probably actually very helpful for some people, but you get the sense that he's starting to warp Yiddishkeit to his.
But this doesn't follow him later, right? Because
well,
you can't like go on Twitter and like look back.
Right. You can't. There's no documentation that he's doing these weird things because he'll just leave. He'll go to another town and he'll start doing some new weird things. There's the time where that switches is once he announces himself as Moshiach and starts building up a following. Everything he does actually gets documented and celebrated. So we'll talk about in a minute where he gets anointed. Actually, we'll do it right now.
All his pre-actions before his announcement of Mashiach is sort of like not. It's sort of not taken into account?
It's either not taken into account, or if it is, then it's explained away as being the thing that Mashiach should do. This is, of course, he should do these things because now is a new period. There's a new Torah. There's everything that happened before was wrong. This is now the new thing to do, the right thing to do. There's a documented experience where he bursts into shul. He like fights with the Rav in the shul and then takes out a Sefer Torah and starts singing. He was very big into singing in general, but he starts singing an erotic Spanish love song to the Sefer Torah. He eats the Korban Pesach. This is after he's announced that he's Moshiach. He eats the Korban Pesach with the forbidden fat, with the chaylev, which you're not allowed to do. And there is a documentation of, at least according to Nathan of Gaza, that he was anointed either by a malach or by Eliyahu, and we even have the date, the 21st of Sivan, 1648, and they composed a song, or a tefillah. Like I said, he's really big into song, so they composed a tefillah to all the things that he did become celebrated days. So now the 21st of Sivan is going to be the day that Mashiach was anointed, right? So let's celebrate it with a song. So we have Shalom, actually, if you want to look it up on page 141 in that book, I'll just give you a brief excerpt. Truly Hashem is good to Yisrael. This is the day on which Amirah, which stands for Adonenu Malkeinu Yarum Hodo, this is a reference to Shabbetai Tsvi, was anointed. Every man returned unto his possessions. It's a quote from Vayikra. On the day of his anointing, the Shekhinah found itself relief. Okay, that's part of the.
Sounds too much.
Yeah. It's the thing that I don't think is taken into as much consideration, and I will preface this with the fact that I'm not a psychologist, is this idea of groupthink and mass hysteria. There is this snowball effect where if everyone believes it, then everyone believes it, right? If everybody in my town has decided, and the Rav of my town, and everybody that I bump into believes that Mashiach is here, and remember, I wake up every morning and say, Ani ma'amin b'emunah shalema, right, that he's coming. And then I read in the newspaper, and my friend tells me that there are people prophesizing in the street, right? There are people, we're not even going to get to like...
You're on the edge, right? Everybody's like...
Yeah, they're primed. They're primed for it. And then, all it takes is a few stories. You can't validate these stories, but hey, my good friend who I trust told me that he was in the next town over, and Dr. Abraham Miguel Cardozo is prophesizing. The guy who, we knew him as the doctor. We just went to him 2 weeks ago. He's prophesizing that Mashiach is here and that Shabbetai Tsvi is Mashiach. Well, that's good enough for me. Like, what else do I need, right? The Rav of my shul is darshaning on Shabbos that Mashiach is here and you should sell all your property and go to Eretz Yisrael. Like, it's a very hard thing to not get swept up, and especially this all comes from Yerushalayim. So Nathan of Gaza is from Gaza. Like, apparently they met in Yerushalayim, but Nathan is sending out letters to the Jewish world. They don't know that he's 21 and whatever. He's sending out letters from Yerushalayim that say, not only is Mashiach here and it's Shabbetai Tsvi, but here's what you need to do. This is the changes you should make to your tefillot. Here's the acts that you should do in order to substantiate that you believe that Mashiach is here. Like, people are getting instructions and they're buying into this. Okay, let's talk about Nathan of Gaza. So he basically has the same experience that Rav Yosef Cairo had. He's in shul. He falls down apparently dead, like they put a sheet over him, he's done. And then a voice starts coming out from his throat indicating that Shabbetai Tsvi is the Mashiach and that you have to believe in him, and like this spooked people. He sends letters, like I said, telling people what they need to do.
You wind up getting
converted
or killed. Or...
So this is very interesting. He doesn't actually travel with Shabbetai Tsvi anywhere. Shabbetai Tsvi and goes off and he believes now he's Mashiach and he tells everybody he's Mashiach and he goes off and does his thing. Every weird thing that Shabbetai Tsvi does, there's a letter coming out from Nathan explaining how Al-Pi Kabbalah. Nathan of Gaza is like, if he wasn't such a Russia for supporting this, he's a unbelievable Kabbalist. The material that he puts out is brilliant, but it's brilliant in service of this fake Messiah. So he explains why Al-Pi Kabbalah, everything that Shabbetai Tsvi does is actually the most holy thing that he could possibly do. But he does that from afar. He does not travel like with the entourage, and it sounds like at the end of the story. So Shabbetai Tsvi dies, and we'll talk about can Moshiach come back from that, and whether or not people believe that. But once he dies, that was it for Nathan. Even after Shabbetai Tsvi converts, you still have Nathan pumping out, this is actually, it's all...
He just felt that the death is the...
He felt that death was it, and it sounds like he took a vow of silence. Like, he was done after that. Like, that was, for him, too much.
No, I'm wrong. No, hey, guys.
No, it was just like, now I don't know.
Yeah.
And shut it down.
Jerk move.
I mean...
Yeah.
Like his whole world,
when are we getting to the fun part? This is all terribly distressing.
No, but his whole world's like shattered.
Huh? Right, like the entire Jewish world is shattered by this.
Yeah.
But he himself, right? He's the PR, right?
Yeah, like, no, but that's what I'm saying. Like, where's the fun part in this?
Right.
Like, this is a tale of tragedy to me. This is like a Tisha B'Av kind of sheer.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Like...
Yeah, I hear you.
Like, the fun thing would be, oh, and now Mashiach's here, and now and day, and by the way, his name is, Shlomo something or other.
Well, we know what doesn't work. Now at least we know what doesn't work.
At this time, right after the Tachbatad, there's all these things happening.
No.
Was there also some Jews? Was there also a Bolshevik movement happening at this time?
No, like historically, like I hear how it's. I'm not trying to rain on your parade.
No, yeah,
I know that you're excited about like it's an interesting story.
Right.
Like, don't get me wrong, it's interesting. I just
not fun.
Yeah, it's like, it's interesting if it happens to somebody else.
Right.
Right.
Like
if I heard that like some crazy dude put one over on the Goyim and he was calling himself Jesus of Nazareth, and he just duped them all, and he happened to be Jewish, and like. Now they've all gone crazy. Okay, fine, it's fine,
But not in my backyard.
There's a guy named Mohammed, and he's totally off his rocker. The Rambam calls him Hamishuga.
Yeah.
Like he's crazy, and like the entire Arab world, goes from being pagan to following this guy. And what a put on, like they're totally just lost. And he has this story that we see in Family Guy with the 72 computer nerds, Right, like okay, that's a funny wind up, but when the egg's on our face, that's not fun at all.
No, I hear that. Okay, we'll do one more person, and then we'll talk about the theology of this next week. So Sarah, Shabbetai Tzvi's second wife, she is a converso who lost her parents and was apparently a prostitute. But she was also telling everybody from her youth, "I'm going to marry Moshiach." And when Shabbetai Tzvi hears this, this is again after he's decided that he's Moshiach. He thinks this is perfect. I need to marry a prostitute because the Navi Hoshea married a prostitute. Yoshua married a prostitute, right? It's not the wrong thing for Mashiach to do. It's actually the holiest thing I could possibly do. So he ends up marrying her, and she stays with him for the duration of the movement. I believe also converting with him when he went to the Sultan and converted. And next time we will talk through some of the sources in Chazal that were perverted in order to justify the movement.
Uh-huh.
Wow, you made it all the way through to the end of this year. Thank you. These series are a passion of mine, and a lot of effort goes into them. I'd be grateful for your help in spreading the awareness to others. If you're interested in joining us live, getting the notes, or asking a question, please message me on Twitter at Isaacson, ISAACSON. Thanks.